In this video, we are going to cover both theoretical as well as practical aspects of the various types of virtualization. You are going to learn about virtual machines. We are going to install VM servers or virtual machine servers. We are going to look at different types that have different performances when running on Linux. We are also going to look at containers. We are going to cover Docker, the installation of Docker, as well as the deployment and running of a Docker application, as well as using Kubernetes to manage and run containers, as well as to deploy multiple replicas of the same container across different pods, across different physical machines, across different data centers. It gives companies like Google the ability to keep the system running even if one data center goes down. And then we will introduce you to K3S. We've already created a video for K3S, so we will provide you with a link to that video so that you can see how we deploy K3S as a cluster, a high availability cluster. We are going to look at three kinds of hardware virtualization systems. We're going to start with creating virtual machines. KVM is built on the Linux kernel and runs substantially faster on Linux than other virtualizations. In some of these topics, we have already videos that we have produced in YouTube. I felt it would be a good way to introduce you to virtualization for those who've never covered the subject by looking at the history. In the 90s, there were many servers, but they were only good for running one type of service, database or web server. Then companies like IBM, Oracle, and VMware introduced virtualization to reduce the power consumption of their data centers. Now you could run many servers virtualized onto one VM server. The concept of creating virtual machines. We will talk about VMs as virtual machines. In 2013, Docker introduced an even lighter solution, the lightweight containers, running mostly a tiny Linux server with a deployed application. But Docker was not open sourced, and a way to manage containers distributing many replicas of a container across a cluster was needed. So in 2014, Google created Kubernetes as an open source project. And Kubernetes was good, and they called it K8S. But with Kubernetes, the code is heavily coded to support legacy versions. In 2019, Rancher created K3S, a form of Kubernetes based on their open source code, but it was now smaller than 100 megabytes. And it was good for running on small systems like Raspberry Pi, but it was still good for production. Virtual machines, or VMs, are isolated from each other, allowing multiple operating systems to run on a single physical host. Containers are a lightweight form of virtualization, I would say extremely lightweight form of virtualization that allows multiple isolated applications to run on a single host. Docker is a popular containerization platform that allows developers to easily package and deploy their applications in containers. Kubernetes is a container orchestration system automatically deploying, scaling, and management of containerized applications. K3S is a lighter version of Kubernetes distribution, less than 100 megabytes. Can run on edge or IoT devices and Raspberry Pi and is suitable for production environments. We are now going to demonstrate how to install VirtualBox on a Ubuntu or Mint Linux machine. After that, we will also give a demonstration of how to create a virtual machine using VirtualBox. We are now going to install VirtualBox on a Linux server. You can also install this on a Linux workstation. One way is to go to virtualbox.org. This URL, we will put a link down below, and choose your operating system, in our case Linux, and then click the download link and download it and install it. However, we have a Ubuntu machine. In this case, it's actually a Linux Mint, which is built as a distro based on the current Ubuntu distribution. So I'm going to connect to that machine. You may notice I'm using No Machine. It's one of the finest remote desktop programs you can get. It will allow you to remote both a Windows as well as a Linux server or workstation. So let me log in. And you can see now I have remoted the desktop. I'm just going to expand this to make it easier to see. Now with Mint Linux, you can do this. You can go to the software manager. In the software manager, you can then select VirtualBox. So we will type VirtualBox. And there it is. It's as easy as clicking on this and clicking the install button. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to go into and this is the way I am going to do it. Sudo apt install. Now you hit the tab and it's fine. There's VirtualBox. So I can just go enter, type in my password. And now you can see we have installed it. Before I can add it to my desktop, I need to reboot this machine. So let's do that. After we have installed VirtualBox, we want to add it to the desktop. In this case, I'm using Linux Mint, so this is easy. I just go here and I search for System Tools, and I just right-click and say Add to Desktop. Having done that, I now have VirtualBox on the desktop. I have installed No Machine. This is a very nice utility that allows you to remote desktops from Windows and Linux, and you can remote Windows machines and you can remote Linux machines. I'm going to remote my first machine, and here you can see that I have installed VirtualBox. Now you need VirtualBox in order to create the virtual machines. If you are new to VirtualBox, you want to create a machine, you will say new. You will give the machine a name. You'll specify how much memory you want to give it. I'm not going to continue with that. So when you've done that, you will then land up with a machine like I have here, and then all you need to do is to edit them. So let's take this one and edit it. So you will go to the system settings and you will set the amount of RAM you want to allocate to the machine. I normally give it half the memory, 4096. So then you get a good performance. Come on, computer. Right. And then you see you set up the optical drive and you point it. You go to storage, you set up the optical drive and you point it to an image. I have a folder with the image and I point it to that folder. Over there, you can tell it to choose a file and then you go find the file. But I'm not going to do that now. You would choose Ubuntu or CentOS and then you would say open. I'm not going to do that now, but that's how you set up your virtual CD drive, that it's going to do the installation. What I do want to point out is the networking settings. I don't use any other network setting but bridged adapter. The reason is I want all these machines to have their own networking and their own IP addresses. I don't want them to share the network connection of the host. So then you set up a bridge adapter and then you go to advanced. Now I choose my network as the T server and not one of the others. I use the 1000-T server as my network and allow everything else. And then once you've done that, then you can start it. Now, because this machine already has Linux installed on it, it's not going to do the installation. But in your case, you would start it and then you would do a Linux installation based on which Linux you want to use. So that's what I want you to take out of this section, is the networking settings and how to create the VM. We have already created a video and published it in YouTube showing how to install KVM on a Ubuntu machine. The link you will find below. However, we will do a demonstration now of how to create a VM on that KVM server. We have now connected with a remote desktop to the server. In this case, it's a Mint Linux machine. And I have now launched the virtual machine manager so that we can create a new machine. We go to the file menu and we say new virtual machine. And here we choose the installation media as local. And then we say browse. And we would like this ISO. Unfortunately, it does not detect Ubuntu ISO, so I had to type the name of the OS as UBU, and then it gave me a list, and I could select Ubuntu. Now we go forward. It is a good practice to allocate half the memory and half the CPUs that are available to your VM if you're running a single VM on the machine, which is what I'm going to be doing. And then we go forward. We are going to use the default storage, which is 25 gigabyte. You need to select the network, otherwise it's not going to work. And this is okay, default network. And now we can say finish. And now it's going to create and install the OS. So now we can press enter. and we will select the language. I'm not going to update. I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to use the entire disk. Ideally, you should sit behind the machine. I am connecting remotely. Now it's telling us what it's going to do, and we say done. Are you sure? Continue. Now we need to give it a password. Now it's telling us how we can remote it. And now we wait for the installation to complete. I am going to stop this video and resume when the installation has completed. It'll take quite a few minutes. As you can see, the installation completed, and now we have a VM. I shut it down during the installation after rebooting it. So now we have a VM that we can use. We are now going to demonstrate how to install Docker on a Linux server. In this case, we will use Ubuntu. Before you can install Docker, we need to first do a sudo apt update. I've currently logged in as root, so I don't really need to do sudo, but it's fine. Root will execute this command. After that, I need to run sudo apt install docker. If you are using CentOS, you would say yum update and yum install docker io. So let's execute this. And as you can see, I've already installed it, so it's telling me that I have the latest version. And then to confirm that it's working, you run docker -- version. And that tells me that I have that version. To test it, you would run this, docker run hello world. I've already got the hello world image in my images, so this is the command you would run. After that, we then want to verify that it's there. So we would run docker images. This will show us all the images. And you can see there's a hello world image there, and it's the latest tag. And if I run this command, hello world should not be running because it runs and dies. So you can see it's not permanently in memory like some of the other apps you will install. But that's fine. That just proves that we installed it, it ran, and it stopped. We have created a video and published it in YouTube on Kubernetes K3S. We would like to recommend that you find time to look at these 3 videos. And now to conclude, we saw how one could use VirtualBox or KVM to create virtual machines, and these could be used as servers. We also saw that instead of running with heavy virtual machines, Docker introduced us to the concept of containers, which are lightweight machines that are built around, most of the time, a Linux server. Then we found that Kubernetes produced a system for the orchestration of the the containers. We also found Rancher K3S produced a much smaller Kubernetes, smaller than 100 megabytes, that could run on the Raspberry Pi, as well as it could be used as a production-grade Kubernetes server. In addition to that, we learned that Kubernetes replaced Docker with Containerd, and K3S kept Containerd as their alternative to Docker. Thank you for watching this video. We trust you found it very useful. Please give us a like, subscribe to our channel so that our channel can grow, and give us a comment on the various topics that we covered.